Netflix's adaptation of Tsugumi Oba and Takeshi Obata's Death Note was different. This was intentional. Adam Wingard, director of this Death Note, explains why.
Well, yeah, I mean, like that was kind of the fun of it, was actually, looking at Death Note in kind of a new light, because the film had been adapted in Japan, a couple times, and, even the anime is an adaptation of the manga, and I think there's a musical in there somewhere, so it's one of those things that's been pretty well covered. And so, for us, it was always about like, let's look at this in a new light.
It is understandable that they would put a new spin on a story that's been done the same way multiple times. Wingard did want to retain the moral ambiguity of violent retribution, as well as the cat and mouse dynamic between L and Light. However, it seems to have been the intention of the director to make this Americanized Light more normal and this Misa more cunning. Aside from the difference in setting, this seemed to be the most drastic change. This change was not well received. Netflix didn't quite capture the magic of the original. I don't think this was due to miscasting. All of the actors seem to fit quite nicely into their roles. Lakeith Stanfield gives an excellent reimagining of Elle, and I can't think of anyone doing a better job at Ryuk than William Dafoe. The leading man and lady even did a fine job acting out their roles, but unfortunately, their roles in and of themselves seem to be the problem. Why make the decision to turn Light into a normie and give Mia domineering control of the role of Kira? Why were these the most prominent changes they'd make to an American spin? Here's my take. I think what's so normal about Light Turner and abnormal about Light Yagami is their stance on women. Yagami sees women as useful tools to assist him to his ends. They're easier to manipulate than men because he's able to easily attract them and cloud their judgment. His judgment is never hindered by his attraction to women. Turner's is. A lot. That's his only character arc. He was a loser who did people's homework for money, and he liked a girl, but she wouldn't give him the time of day. Then he gets a magic death book, and she's all aflutter with excitement to be his little honey. What I saw was a weak, misguided kid who let his romanticism make him vulnerable to manipulation. Mia used him like Light Yagami used Misa. Their relationship was just a means to an end. There's no time spent in developing Mia's character past I'm a cheerleader and nothing matters because I'm powerless, but if I get power of the Death Note, then my life means something, whatever. The point that I'd like to make is that Light Turner is pathetic, and Light Yagami is formidable. Yagami is intimidating, and Turner is a pushover. He's a white knight that's gynocentric to the core, and whose hero complex relies entirely on getting the girl. He got his personal revenge for the death of his mother, and all the rest is just a show for me. Her interest in Turner is entirely founded on the Death Note. And once she comes up with a way to remove the Death Note from him, she goes for it. Many men today learn this same lesson in divorce courts. Women overwhelmingly initiate divorce because it serves to benefit women overwhelmingly. It seems fitting to me that this lesson would be portrayed in a film based on a Japanese manga. The Japanese have been ahead of the world in establishing an army of men who have opted out of relationships with women. It's been estimated that the majority of single men in their 20s and 30s actively avoid relationships with women. This group is stigmatized as being pathetic and called Shushoke Danshi, or herbivore men. It is a phenomenon that's been coined as a mainstream concern in Japan since the mid-2000s. Why are so many men in Japan deciding against relationships with women? It seems to be the general consensus among the Japanese people that these men are single because they're weak, lack confidence, and are generally losers. They can't get women because they're inadequate, shy, and effeminate, not because they don't want women. But the size of this group is large and growing, and that makes me think that there is something else behind Japanese men's apathy towards relationships. Approximately 70% of Japanese men between the ages of 18 to 35 have never been married. Is it true that 70% of Japanese men are passive and incompetent? If not, then why would men who could have relationships with women decide that they're not worth the trouble? The Japanese work environment is what first comes to mind. The Japanese have a reputation of overworking their employees and have recently passed laws capping the long work hours to 100 hours of overtime per month. This was done in an attempt to curb the issue of karoshi, or death from overwork. Even with these arduous work hours, Japanese men are not pulling in the amount of money women expect from eligible marriage partners. When the actual distribution of income among men and women is compared, there is a particular gap between what women regard as the ideal income and the actual state of men's income. To be married in Japan for a man means devoting himself entirely to work. What do married Japanese men get for sacrificing their personal freedom? An okuzukai, or allowance. In around half of Japanese households, the wife controls all of the finances. As far as the sex life of the average married Japanese man goes, it has been reported that only 25% of females claim to be regularly involved in sexual activities with their husbands. The most common activity shared between couples is having dinner. Since most Japanese women work as well, I suspect that's about the only time couples even see each other. These statistics paint a less than ideal picture of marriage in the minds of the majority of Japanese men. To consider relationships with women less valuable than personal freedom is an attitude that's catching on everywhere, but Japan seems to be the thought leader. So, what does the average gynocentric man of the West have to learn from these descendants of samurai? What does Light Yagami know that Light Turner comes to learn? The film ends with Mia's betrayal of Light Turner. He's able to turn the tables with some overthought contingency plan, but he didn't expect to use it. He really believed that Mia loved him. She didn't. She couldn't. No woman could love a man in the way men love women. That is the tragedy of this film. Watching this pathetic dweeb fall to his doom off his self-made Ferris wheel of terror really made me pity him. You can see the pain on his face that he's going to lose the love of his life, and you really gotta give Nat Wolff credit for his performance. I mean, he is great at playing the pathetic loser type. It's very convincing. The truth that Turner learns the hard way is called Briefholt's Law. Briefholt's Law is the observation that where the female can derive no benefit from the relationship with the male, no association takes place. Mia had no reason to notice Turner until he had the Death Note. The benefit that she derived from the relationship with him was separable, and she did all she could to manipulate Turner into giving it up. He made manipulating him easy for her. Consider the scene where he tells Mia about the Death Note. He sought her out and used the Death Note to lure her into a relationship with him. He intended to tell her, and that's why he was just nonchalantly flipping through the Death Note during her gym period. Why? Because he cares more about getting the girl than getting justice. I cringed when he was so open about it to her, and I'm sure most people familiar with the original did as well. Contrast this scene with how Light Yagami came into an alliance with Misa Amane. She appeared as a copycat and made a number of mistakes that put Light at risk. She even had the nerve to go straight to his house and introduce herself. Light proceeded to grill Misa on the details of her previous actions leading up to their encounter. He was taken aback by her request that he make her his girlfriend. His first thought was about the risk involved in manipulating her. To Yagami, it was all business. He remained suspicious of her until he understood her motives, and only then began using her to meet his ends. Watching Yagami deepen Misa's infatuation with him for the purpose of reducing the risk in using her made Yagami appear more cunning, powerful, and evil. He even intended to kill Misa once he was through with using her Shinigami eyes to discover L. The only thing that stopped him was a threat from Rem, Misa's Shinigami. Even after considering her usefulness, she seemed more like a nuisance than anything else to Light. Yagami's other love interest, Kiyomi Takada, didn't seem to be much more interesting to him past how he could use her as Kida. With no Shinigami to watch over her, Light kills her once she's more of a liability than an asset. While it is true that normalizing Light Turner makes him more sympathetic as a protagonist, I found it more entertaining to watch Light Yagami's machinations. Neither Turner or Yagami are good guys, but one certainly seemed more dignified than the other. No man wishes he was more like Light Turner. But who doesn't wish they were more intelligent, cunning, and excellent as Light Yagami personified in a completely evil way? There's fun in playing the villain, at least in fantasy. By the end of Netflix's Death Note, Turner reveals his evil plot to beat Mia if she betrays him. He's liberated from her control and seems empowered by that. L acquires a page from the Death Note, and Adam Wingard leaves Turner's fate open to a sequel. Will this experience with Mia transform Turner into a more compelling villain? Will he cast aside his gynocentrism to become a formidable manipulator? Will the Western man walk away from women in the same way the herbivore men of Japan have? These questions are left to our imagination. Unfortunately for Adam Wingard, there will be no sequel.